One last question, and a lot of people that start designing or have app ideas in the case of using Bravo to create products. How do you find your first client? What is that advice that you could give based on your experience? How do you scout that first client? Hi, Anna. Welcome to the Bravo Studio channel. We're really happy to have you with us today. We really wanted to have this time to get to know more about you and what you do and your experience. So let's kick it off right away, and let's start with the main questions and tell us about yourself and your professional journey.
Of course, thank you so much for having me.
Sure.
So a little bit about myself, a little bit about how I've arrived to this position I have now. So I started as a visual designer after I finished my degree. That was 10 years ago, so time flies.
Definitely.
And so back then, I started mainly working on websites, working on visual design, so more from a visual design perspective. And through time, I started getting more interested in the user experience field, in the UX field. And I've worked with some agencies back in the UK. So I was working in the UK for around 5, 6 years. And so this journey was mostly within the UX field. But then after my experience in the UK, I came back to Portugal where I started freelancing. So my first experience freelancing was still pretty much hands-on, so pretty much UI design. But I also had this amazing opportunity to work on more of a consulting role, and that was my first experience dealing with consulting, with events, training, which was for Google for the mobile UX initiative in Portugal, based in Portugal. So that was when I found my passion for education, which is what I'm focusing now. So right now I'm focusing mostly on working still within the UX field with educational providers, ed tech, but also mostly on the training development fields, which we call learning experience design, which is basically UX, instructional design, and learning science together. So that's pretty much a bit of my story summarized.
Yeah, definitely not just a bit. I mean, it's a really incredible journey, and I congratulate you for that. I think it's super interesting how the path changes as we learn and we start to find what we really like and enjoy doing. Um, how did you decide to switch from the consulting or working from large companies, like you mentioned, Google, for instance, to freelancing? Besides, of course, the freedom of from moving from the UK to Portugal, of course, and working remotely. How did you decide to take that switch and start freelancing?
That's a good question. So when I had that role at Google, and the role I started at Google was a contract role, so I had the freedom as well to continue in that role, apply for a different role in a different city in the world. But however, when I started in that role, I met so many people and from different companies, and I met so many different teams, and I realized I was able to make a difference as an external consultant. So of course, in the role I had, I was limited because I couldn't provide them services. Of course, we were limited in the amount of support we could give them. We gave them lots of support. We had events. We were advocating for mobile UX, but of course, it's always a limitation. So I thought, me as an external consultant, I'm able to create impact now that I understand better how different teams work, both small companies or big size companies. So I thought it was really interesting for me. And back then, I was not even imagining I would be doing so much training. So I think my idea initially was, okay, I'm going to be an external consultant. I'm going to help these teams develop, maybe help them improve the UX maturity. And in the end, that was pretty much the journey that happened. I ended up mostly conducting training for those companies. So I think that creative freedom, of course, of being able to work in different projects. So not being just in one specific project, select my own initiatives, the ones I'm passionate about. I think it was mostly one of the main reasons, and being able to create impact. And of course, like you said, having my own hours, choosing where I want to work from. So those were all factors, definitely.
That's really, really interesting. And talking about education, since you mentioned and trainings and the learning part of it, how did you discover that ultimate passion for education?
Good question. And I think I always loved teaching, always. I just didn't think it was the main thing I would be doing, especially because I love everything that has to do with the design field, with the UX field. So I never imagined myself stepping out from that field. But then when I realized I could do both things together, and I think it was a mix of opportunities that I had. For example, being able to be a mentor for some boot camps, online schools, educational providers. That was also a huge factor because I started to understand I really enjoy helping and teaching UX to aspiring designers or students. And then also the other side, more of a corporate side where I was able to conduct training for companies and see how the dynamics of the teams also change depending on the skill sets, depending on the training needs. So all of that made me realize training is really much more complex and there's so much to learn. And mainly the field of learning experience design that I didn't know of before, knowing that it's actually a blend of UX, so the learner-centered education. So the learner is the user. I thought that's magic. That's exactly what I want to do. So that's pretty much that.
Definitely, that I think being able to teach and to share knowledge, I think, is the best feeling. Whatever it is, you should always try to share it, and there's always people on the other side appreciating that part. Now, we've seen you on social media, you're super active, and we really wanted to ask you, did your personal branding on social media help you achieve your goals?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. I think social media mostly helps me with my own journey as well. So when I create content, I am also understanding what I enjoy doing, what I enjoy sharing. But in terms of educational content, I think it helped me a lot because social media is also a way for me to create educational content. I think most people don't realize that educational content is not just a blog post, informative blog post, or even an Instagram 10 page or 10 slide carousel. So sometimes it's really a small thing. It's raising awareness about a specific topic. It's opening a debate. So learning is much more than just information. So that was something I found on social media. And even in terms of business goals, definitely social media allowed me to make so many connections with companies, with people who are also interested in me training for their companies. So it definitely opened so many doors. And I'm grateful for that. And Instagram, LinkedIn, those were probably some of
Definitely.
the main ones. Yeah.
Awesome. There is obviously a big movement, and perhaps the pandemic situation helped transition to take this a little bit more serious in terms of becoming a freelancer. If you would have to give an advice to people that are starting to freelance or considering to freelance, what would that be?
So my advice would be have a plan first, and there are different ways to approach this. So when I first started freelancing, I didn't have a plan. It's not impossible. It's difficult. It's a bit challenging. I thought it was a bit challenging in the beginning. And then I realized that for me, considering the way I work, so I think it's very important that if someone wants to start being a freelancer or being an independent consultant, they need to understand the way they work. Because I need, for example, I need to know that I have a specific source of income, I have something that is fixed, right? And during the time I started, in the beginning, when I started freelancing, I realized, okay, so I need to have, I called it a bit of a safety net. I actually had a specific name for that. I wrote a post about it, but I can't remember now. But go to my Instagram. I think you'll find it. But yes, but basically it's having that safety net. So having that um, that allows you to really embrace freelance, because if you don't have that, for example, that can happen in different ways. It can happen either you have a partnership with an agency, so you do work for them monthly, for example, or you have a partnership with a company that you provide services. And why is that important? Because it allows you to have some freedom when you choose the projects you want to work on. Otherwise, what I felt in the beginning was, okay, I stopped working for one boss, but now I'm working for so many bosses, so it's still the same. So yeah, I think it's really important. Have a plan and know exactly where the next like where is the source of income coming, because that can affect the experience you have in the end with freelancing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a very good advice, and to be ready to face the situation that you're, even if you will end up having a lot of bosses at the beginning, you start on your own and you really
Yeah.
have to fight through, and having or securing a sort of safety net or buffer can really help give you peace of mind also to be more relaxed and really enjoy the projects that come along. Now, how's your day-to-day life as a freelancer? How do you balance your free time, your day in general?
So I think now it's a bit different. I think so. When I was more of a hands-on designer, I think most of my work was done from home. So I did have meetings, mostly remote, because most of the work was done remotely. So I think I went through different phases, and my day-to-day also evolved depending on the type of role and the type of focus I had. So when I was doing mostly hands-on, most of my work was done from home. It was very individual, very lonely sometimes. You had the occasional meetings with the team, but it was all done remotely, and it was very heavy in terms of workload. When I started doing more consulting and more training, my day to day started being more, so I did it in person as well. I didn't just do remotely. So I had more of a balance there. So some of my work was done remotely, some of my work was done in person. I had a chance to actually go to the companies, go to the meetings, train face to face, which is amazing, do events, all of that I love doing. So it was a bit more dynamic in that sense. After the pandemic, things changed again, as you can imagine. So we had to do, I actually had a few projects lined up that were supposed to be in person. I was supposed to travel, and of course, I couldn't. So I ended up having to adapt to the remote. And I think that's also what made me fall even more in love with education, how to actually conduct a training or teach people everything remotely and still keep the same engagement, or try to still have a good training that engages the learners. So that was a big challenge for me in the beginning, of course. And I would say that nowadays, most of my work is again done remotely. I still do trainings. I'm now working in new projects more related to curriculum and training development, so a bit less the typical design roles. So I would say it involves many, many meetings. I also still have calls with students, so I do mentoring as well on the side. So my day is pretty much um, slots of time in my calendar. Some slots are for meetings, client meetings, students, and other slots are for work. But I would say it's much more dynamic than in the beginning of my.
Definitely. I think the tools that we have today is making it easier to adapt to this moment that we are in. Of course, Zoom, Slack, and all these tools are really helping us to stay connected, which is still, I think, super important. If we have the chance to meet personally, I think it's always great, but we start to realize that we can maybe be even more productive if we do shorter meetings, do them online, and work really, really well. But definitely it's also important to keep meeting people and socialize after all, even if it's work related.
Absolutely.
Now, one last question, and a lot of people that start designing or have app ideas in the case of using Bravo to create products. how do you find your first client? What is that advice that you could give based on your experience? How do you scout that first client?
I think it's all about connections, really. I think it's very important that you put yourself out there and don't be afraid, even if you are a junior, even if you are a beginner. Many times my students feel and ask me, how should I put myself out there if I'm still a beginner? So you don't need to be teaching or teaching in a traditional sense because you are still learning yourself, but share your journey, share your learning journey with others, share your progress, share your work. I think it's a lot about making connections, and social media is a great place for that. Because that's also when I make connections, I also have these opportunities to work with companies, to work with people. And sometimes it's not as obvious as this idea we have. We need to talk to the big boss. We need to talk to the decision makers. Sometimes it happens such informal way. Sometimes you are just talking to a person that works for that company, and that person knows other person, and then in the end, when you realize they already are advocating you, they're already selling you and your services within their company. So connections for me are a big part, and I think that's when I also started growing in my own career as an independent. That's when I started making connection as opposed to just seeking project on a project basis.
Definitely, I think, and like I was briefing you before the call, I'm not a designer myself, but I was able to actually find good leads, not by trying to look to sell something, but identifying a problem that was obvious and create a solution or create an idea about the solution and share it. And most likely they will say, well, let's try it, no? Yeah. So I think it's being not just looking to make money, but really to help and solve problems. This will become real good leads. Anna, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us in our channel for Bravo Studio. I think we should maybe connect again soon and do a course or a capsule of what you do best, which is teaching on UX. And I think all our audience will appreciate that. If you like this type of content, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel because there's a lot of great videos coming up every week. So stay tuned. Anna, thank you so much. Thank you from Barcelona, and hopefully we meet again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.